Hi, people. This is Matthew Robert Payne, and you're on my YouTube channel. Today, we've got a very special guest on the YouTube channel. Like you see on news shows, the person doesn't want to reveal their face. I'm introducing a really good friend of mine called Nicola Whitehall. That's a pen name that she uses. She's writing a very deep and introspective memoir that, if she published it under a real name, would expose a lot of people and cause trouble. So she's decided to write under a pen name and not have a real name revealed. Nicola is a friend of mine, which is a pen name, and she serves on my prophetic site. So we're just going to have a little interview. We've got an idea of some of the questions we're going to ask, and then we're just going to feel our way through it. I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but if any one of you have read Mary Magdalene Speaks from Heaven, Enoch Speaks from Heaven, and the upcoming Michael Jackson Speaks from Heaven, Book 2, you'll know Nicola Whitehall from those books. If you've been to my prophetic website and requested a prophecy before, you'll see that her name is there, that you can request a prophecy of Nicola. Nicola's very experienced in the prophetic and does really rich and rewarding prophetic words, and has blessed my life before. So perhaps you might want to request a prophecy of her. I heard some of these stories earlier today and have encouraged Nicola to come forth and share them because I feel that people who've suffered, though they might not have suffered like Nicola or gone through the things like Nicola, it always helps to know that a Christian is overcoming even against impossible odds, or even against things that when they didn't have a good start in life. So, Nicola, the first question I'll ask you is, how did we meet?
I started off, Matthew, by I think I saw a Facebook post you'd written, and I somehow came across your books. I read several of your books, like The Prophetic Evangelism Made Simple. I was really interested in how to communicate my faith with others, and I read about 5 of your books. I really enjoyed your book, your memoir. I found that really fascinating and really deep. I really got a lot out of it, and so I wrote to you expressing my thoughts about some of your books and what you'd written, and then we connected later.
So would you say that a good way to get to know an author is to read all their books, especially if they're non-fiction books? Would you say, how would you say you got to know me the most? Through our phone calls that we spend time on the phone most days? Or did you learn the bulk of your information in the books that I've read, the 50 books that I've written?
Probably the most in your books, because your books really lay it out, and you really flow when you write. When you're an author, you really have all your stories together, and the Holy Spirit's really moving you. So that's how I see it. So I got to know your little personality quirks and your personality more when I was speaking to you on the phone. But definitely all your life stories, I remember them from your books most. Yeah.
From your experiences, here's a question you haven't heard before. From your experiences, if you're a reader and you really connect with an author, would you suggest writing to their email address or their contact details? Did you find that? Did you get surprised writing to me? Firstly, would you suggest people write to an author that has touched them? And secondly, did you get surprised that I answered?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest it. I think writers really crave feedback, and you might be surprised at how much they're blessed by hearing how their writing has affected your life. Because Matthew's writing really touched me, and it drew me deeper into the prophetic and into the supernatural topics, and I learnt so much, and then I was able to write with him and grow. And yes, I was surprised that I was contacted. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting that. So yeah, it was great to have a friendship with Matthew after having read his books as well. Yeah.
So you told me earlier today that at school you had no friends. Can you tell us a little bit about those school days, or as much as you like about those school days, how you coped in school at a young age, not having any friends?
Yeah. Yeah, I first started at intermediate school where I kind of, my mum went into hospital and I drifted off, and having had friends at primary school, I just suddenly went very introspective into myself and couldn't communicate with people. And this continued into my, I had some cruelty against me in my intermediate years. I had some rejection from some of the girls. Um, and I just lost hope. I just yeah, I just lost hope. And so then I desperately tried to make friends in my high school years, which is what we're talking about today. But I just didn't know how. I didn't know how you make a friend. I didn't know how to take an interest in somebody else's life. Um, I couldn't make friends. I didn't know how to connect. I made a few desperate attempts, but was kind of rejected. And so I just gave up. So I couldn't make friends until I think in my second year at high school, there was a girl, a Christian girl, and she had a group of friends, and they all met together at lunchtime in a certain spot every day. And she saw me several times over the years on my own. She'd see me at the lockers, and she'd say, "Oh, come here," and she'd motion for me to come over to with her, and I'd go and sit by the group of Christian girls, and they were very animated, and they'd talk about their youth group. I wasn't a Christian at the time. So I didn't really understand their joy, and I didn't really understand all their activities and their talk about God. But I just sat there. I was too shy to communicate with people. I didn't know how to communicate with people. But I sat there, and I was at least pleased that I had somewhere to sit at lunchtime instead of being not having anywhere to go.
You mentioned before you had that friend and you sat with those girls that you'd noticed another girl that was being picked on, and you didn't want to be picked on like her for having no friends. You used to fill in the time in these break times. How did you fill in the time?
Yeah. There were times when I was too afraid to sit by the Christian girls because I just didn't really have friends there. I couldn't connect, so I was even too nervous to walk to see where the Christians were. So I would try and work out strategies so that because the girl that had no friends, with people in the school were quite nasty to her. They would call her nasty names and yell out at her, and I heard that they threw rocks at her and things. I was terrified of becoming in that situation, and I was too introspective to be able to help her. I didn't think I could help her. So I just I would be in science class and would be eating my lunch. I'd be doing a science experiment in a group, and I'd quickly go to the side and very secretly pull out a part of my sandwich and shove it into my mouth. Then I'd go back to the science experience and then experiment, and then I'd keep doing the same thing until I'd had enough food. And then during the lunchtime, I would, before anybody could see me, I'd put my bag in the cloakroom and go and hide in the library, hide somewhere and read a book and pretend that I had something I was supposed to be doing or work I was supposed to be doing. Sometimes in interval, I would go into the toilets, and there was a row of about 20 or 30 toilets, so I just hoped no one would notice, and I'd stay in the toilet for, for 20 minutes or half an hour, or I don't even know if I spent some lunch times in the toilet. So I just stayed in the toilet stall, put the toilet seat down, sat on the toilet, and just was very scared.
When I heard Nicola's story today, it really touched my heart. I had friends at school, but and was accepted not in the top group at school, but sort of like a middle range group of semi-smart guys, and I was included in things at school, and I tended to have friends, and it just seems such a sad way to start your life that it really impacted me. And I thought that there may be some people that listen, or there may be one of your friends that you could share this YouTube video with, that this would encourage, because it's people don't really need to give us any answers sometimes. Sometimes it's just really comforting to hear that someone else has suffered. You mentioned before we did the interview that you went through a season where you got quite suicidal and your Christian friends were concerned. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I got to my second to last year at school and I was really panicking because everybody had friends and I still hadn't managed to connect after I'd had 4 years at high school. So again, I made some desperate attempts to make friends, and again, I was rejected. And so I just lost all hope because I'd been trying for so long, and sometimes I'd stop trying and sometimes I'd try, but I made a last ditch effort and I failed. So as school was ending in my second to last school year, um, I was very obsessed about dance. So I just failed a dance exam that I'd done, and it was very important to me. So I had no friends, and dance was so important to me. And I just failed my exam, and I thought the dance skills at the dance school were the only people who I had any kind of. I didn't really know them as friends either, but there was a sort of a comradeship there. I was part of a group, and I was scared of being left behind in the group because I'd failed the dance exam. So I became very obsessive about dance, and I used to practice every day and punish myself using dance. And I started to think that I was evil and that I was more evil than Hitler. I started to enter into what you'd call a psychosis, although I didn't know that's what it was at the time. And I thought that I was hurting people, and I thought that I was letting my parents down. And as I went into the school year, I, instead of hiding this time, I just sat at the desk in the common room in my last year at school, and I just did my work all lunchtime, all interval, and then I went to dance class. And some people were cruel to me then because I upset people because of the way I was. And I couldn't cope very well anywhere, and people you seemed to be upset by the way I was acting. I wasn't talking to people who tried to talk to me. I thought that if they talked to me, they would see how evil I was, and that was so terrifying to me that I just couldn't talk to them. I just put my head down and pretend to start working again. So it came to a point where I felt mid kind of a quarter of the way through the year of my last year at school, I started to decide that I was hurting people and I couldn't stop hurting people, so I had to take my life. And I thought my parents would be more disappointed if they saw what a disappointing person I was, and that they'd prefer it if I took my life now. I also thought that that if I thought if there's a hell, if I die now, I will have done less bad things, so my punishment will be less severe. So I didn't know it at the time, but there was a lot of girls at the school were very concerned about me, just girls that didn't know me. And some of the Christian group were very concerned about me, and I didn't know that they'd been praying for me. So I went to the Bible just before I decided to commit suicide, and I thought maybe God has an answer for me. So I read the Bible, and I found the scripture that said, that if you've turned away from God after following him, then there's no forgiveness left for sins. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to hell. So I thought, anyway, so I went to kill myself. And then I found I'd made a decision that's what I was going to do. I didn't want to. I was crying. I didn't want to die, but I thought I was upsetting so many people. So yeah, so what I had was a psychosis. I was my thinking wasn't normal. I wasn't thinking in a normal way. I had a illness I didn't realize I did, and nobody else realized I did. So then suddenly it was like someone had turned a light on, and suddenly all the thinking that I'd had in my mind about upsetting people and I had to die and I was evil like Hitler, I was worse than Hitler, all these weird thoughts just suddenly, like, they left my mind in an instant. And if you know anything about mental illness, that doesn't happen. Your psychosis doesn't just disappear in a second. It just doesn't work like that. It leaves gradually over a period of time usually. So I just think that my friends at school that I didn't do anything for, but who were friends to me, their prayers actually caused that change in my mind that caused me to think, what am I doing here? And I just literally abandoned my suicide attempt and just walked out the door. And yeah.
That's it's really interesting that you share that. I've been at the point of wanting to kill myself 4 times, and for many years I've lived with not wanting to be here, and I've listened for over 25 years to people's conversations about suicide, and I've watched news broadcasts, I've watched things on TV that talk about suicide, and most of what I've heard over my whole life is, to me, is just total garbage. And one of the biggest accusations people make at people who commit suicide are they're so selfish. But it's very interesting to hear from you, because I felt the same way, that when you're so sad and depressed and you're so down and no one can help you, it's almost the most non-selfish act you can do, that you think you're putting your friends and family out of their misery, leaving and getting rid of the situation that they can't handle. And it's very interesting to hear that that was your same thought process yourself, that you thought you were helping people out by getting rid of the problem.
Yeah.
You mentioned, do you want to speak into that a little more, that this claim that people are so selfish seems to be the total opposite of how you are feeling?
Yeah, I had years later, while I was still struggling at times with suicidal ideations, but never as serious as this time, I remember someone telling me when I confessed that I was feeling suicidal, and they said, you know, you're selfish, you're self-absorbed, and just all those sort of things. And you know, whether it's true or whether it's not, it's just the most unhelpful thing anybody can say to you. It doesn't help you in any way. It just makes you feel condemned and want to withdraw from people further and not seek help. So it didn't help me at all. That's all I could say about that.
Yeah, I found for many years that most people's, even professional comments and professional opinions on suicide was a pile of garbage to me. You know how you know something in your knower, you may have a question about a verse in a Bible verse, and you may hear 10 or 20 preachers preach, this is what this verse means, and you've got a knower that says, yes, 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 or no, 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 no. Most times it's no, 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 that's not what it means. No, that's not what it means. So in my knower, everything I'd ever heard people talk about suicide was a pile of garbage. My knower was saying, this is garbage, this is garbage. And I remember one time I was part of this course to become a volunteer for Salvation Army, and they brought this pastor in, and he spoke on suicide. And for the first time, I heard someone speaking the truth about suicide. And I was in tears, and I ended up getting angry at the end of that meeting over something. And it had really touched me so hard that it got me really emotional, that someone understood what I'd been battling with for all those years. So you mentioned at some stage you became a Christian. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think, I can't remember if it was before or after the near suicide attempt. I remember the Christian girls that were praying for me that I didn't know at the time who were praying for me. They kind of accosted me in an area that they knew I would have to walk into the classroom, and they all stood in a circle and they all tried to invite me to ice cream. They said, "Oh, Nicola, do you do you like ice cream? Do you want to come to an ice cream party? And I wasn't in a place where I could receive that, but it was kind of like a light in the darkness. So their prayers and things like that. And when it was my birthday in the middle of the year, a couple of girls, I'd invited them to my birthday party the year before. They just didn't say anything. They obviously knew that I didn't talk to people. They just came up to my desk, gave me 2 birthday cards, and these were the Christian girls, including the one that befriended me earlier on in my high school years. And I was just so touched. I didn't do anything for them. I didn't ask them about their days. I didn't spend time with them. I didn't know anything about what was happening in their life, and yet they reached out and cared for me. And I was so touched with what I was going through when on my birthday they gave me 2 birthday cards. And it was shortly after that, maybe a couple of weeks after that, that in the middle of the night, maybe 4 a.m., the Lord spoke to me, and he said, I didn't know, I wasn't a Christian, but I heard a voice speak to me in my mind, and he said, amongst other things, he said, what has happened to you is not your fault, and I have forgiven you. And it was like a huge weight was lifted off me, because all I thought was that I was hurting people, I'd hurt people, I was always letting people down. And I didn't understand, but I was so relieved to hear that it wasn't my fault, even if I didn't fully understand. So I told my mother. The next day, or the next few days, I found a Pentecostal church. I'd never been to a Pentecostal church. I was brought up Presbyterian, but I went to a Pentecostal church and got baptized, and became a Christian quite radically.
And it has, well, first of all, I just want to make a comment there. I've got a book called Influencing Your World for Christ. I've got another book called Becoming the Light of Christ, and 13 Tips to Becoming the Light of Christ. In those books, I talk about befriending people and being the light of Christ, being a good story, being a good person in people's lives, and then how you can influence people for the sake of the gospel in the future. And we see very clearly that on Nicola's birthday, those 2 cards really strongly impacted her and resonated with her, and opened her heart to the Christian message, which allowed the Lord a couple of weeks later to come and visit her in an encounter and say that he's Jesus, and for her to be open towards Christ, because Christians had shown her so much love, and they opened the door for that encounter. And sometimes when you've got emotional struggles, we're open to Jesus speaking direct to our minds. Some people wouldn't be able to have that encounter. But that whole Christian experience, that new light that came into your life, you said before, brought a lightness to your step, a weight came off your shoulders, which are clear signs of a conversion. And then you said you eventually befriended the girl that had no friends at school.
So before I'd been afraid of being in her position, but now I had a lot of compassion for her. My new faith in Christ gave me such a boldness, because I didn't need to care about what people thought anymore, because I was forgiven and I was free, and everything seemed wonderful. And I was talking to people. In fact, I wouldn't shut up. I was, communicating with people and talking to people all the time. And hadn't done that for maybe 8 months. And so I saw this girl, and I really wanted to reach out to her in a way that I hadn't before. So I started walking up to her, and at first she walked away, but then she could see that I was genuine, and so I started talking to her. I started befriending her. I started sitting by her at lunch and chatting with her, and eventually she saw that I wasn't a threat to her. I went home to her house and met her family and her parents. And she'd never had a friend, as far as I know. I think her mother told me later that I was her first friend. She would have been in her second to last year at school, and she'd been treated horribly. She really had been treated horribly. When I first tried to befriend her, girls that would see it, because she was so ostracized, they would give me evil looks, and they would try and attack me as well. But I just stare back at them, and I'd give them evil looks back until they had to look away. And I just eventually people accepted that I was her friend and left me alone and left her alone. Yeah, and I had a bit of good time with her in the last 6 months of that year.
I just I'll ask you to close. That's a really befitting close that Nicola had been reached out to by Christians, and then within a little while, the fruit of Jesus' presence in her life had turned around, and she was bearing fruit and making friends with the friendless. And we all know, if we read the scriptures, that Jesus is all about the lonely and depressed, and people that are treated unjustly, seeing justice and seeing love, and it's befitting fruit of the Holy Spirit. I have to say that I've known Nicola for 2 years now, and one time we're having a phone conversation, and we recorded the last book of Michael, just having a phone conversation, and we recorded the phone conversation, and we did a whole interview with Michael. But from time to time, the Lord will prophesy through me, or something important will be done, and Nicola will turn on her recorder. One time she spoke for about 10 minutes about character traits that she saw in me and the good points that she saw in me. And at the end of it, I was really stunned. And it's the most comprehensive look at my life and who I was that I'd ever experienced. And I've had hundreds of prophecies. Nothing ever got near that. And I said to her at the end, I wish you had recorded that. Well, the next morning, she had a few hours sleep. And the next morning at 6 a.m. or something early in the morning, she woke up, and Jesus said, I want you to sit down and type out what you said to Matthew last night, because it's very important for him. And I have to say, I'm 51 years of age. I've gone from church to church. I've got 1,600 videos, 50 or more books. I've got 850 articles. And I've never met anyone that knows me better than Nicola. And she has become a very close and dear friend of mine, and someone that I'd be very sad to have to break fellowship and break communication with. Nicola has gone on and come on to be extremely prophetic and a gifted writer, and she is the co-author of 3 books. Eventually, in a month, there'll be 3 books. One called Mary Magdalene Speaks from Heaven, Enoch Speaks from Heaven, and Michael Jackson Speaks from Heaven, book 2. We plan to write many books with interviews from saints, and I can see Nicola, I've prophesied over Nicola that she'll write many books in her own right that will be non-fiction books, and I believe that she'll do a very good job of that. So to all of you people who know me and know my books and watching this, I just wanted to introduce someone that's very special and dear to my life. I do keep myself busy, and I produce a book a month, and I keep pretty busy, but I always have time in my day to speak to Nicola. So with all that being said, is there any final things that you want to leave one of these people who've had difficulties in their life with? Is there any parting message that you'd like to leave with them, Nicola?
You just don't know what your actions as a Christian. You may think that what you're doing is simple, encouraging someone, giving someone a birthday card, someone to an ice cream party, praying for someone. It may seem like a job or just another thing you're doing to help someone, but for someone who's going through a terrible crisis, you don't know how that's going to impact them. You don't know that could save their life. You just have no idea what your prayers, the things that you do to bless people, how it impacts people. You may not know till you get to heaven. And Matthew has been a very dear friend to me, and he's really reached out to me and really input into my life. I think he's an amazing man of God and prophet, and I really appreciate knowing him, and I really thank him for allowing me to speak today.
Well, God bless all you readers. Nicola's subscriber to this channel, so I encourage you to post a comment in the comments and let us know what you think of this video. Let Nicola know in particular if you were touched by a story or it brought up any emotions for you. You can contact Nicola through my website. You can request a prophecy of Nicola. If you write to my email address, I can give you Nicola's personal email address. And with that, I encourage you to leave your comments, and I hope that this has blessed you and encouraged you. And I just pray that whatever you are going through currently, that the Lord Jesus Christ will help you. God bless.